The Red Sox fall in the second day in a row against the Tampa Bay Rays, but Triston Casas gets in on the action, and Christian Arroyo continues to swing a hot bat. But Jamie Gatlin and I talk a little bit about this Red Sox loss and also a little bit about some injury updates. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I want to welcome you back into the Locked On Red Sox podcast, and thank you so much for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen of every single day. I'm your host, Massachusetts Pirates team insider and WooSox production assistant Jake Ignaszewski, and we are back for another episode, but not on great terms once again. The Red Sox once again lose to the Tampa Bay Rays for the second night in a row, but I have on a very special guest with me. He is the producer at ABC News 4 and the co-host of the Obstructed View podcast, Jamie Gatlin. So how are we doing today, Jamie?
Doing good. Happy to be here to talk some Sox.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a little bit. I think it's been around 3 months or so since we've talked last. A lot has changed. Obviously, a little bit for the worse, unfortunately. But what's nice is, the Sox are getting some players back from the injury bug. Triston Casas, Connor Wong coming up. We're starting to finally see the future in sort of the plan of 2023. But what has been your thoughts so far over the past week or so, seeing sort of, Casas and Wong really show what they've got?
I think just looking towards the future, especially where the Sox are right now, the playoff hopes are slim. So just seeing these guys who are supposed to be key contributors, excel has been fun to see, especially with Bayo. If you look at his stats, ERA of like 5.9, which isn't going to jump out you, but his last 3 starts, he hasn't allowed more than 3 runs. He's not having those blow-up innings. He's looking more composed on the mound. You mentioned Connor Wong, hits a homer in his first game after being recalled, walks 3 times in the second game. Catches the runner stealing. That's what you want to see when you give young players opportunities like this.
And with Wong, I mean, he's hit like 9 or 10 home runs in, the last month and a half or so. I mean, I was very impressed all throughout my time seeing him in Worcester all throughout this season. Has very good plate patience as well as is able to really flash some of that power. We haven't seen that from him in the past. And, we also see how pitchers rave about him having attention to detail, being a great catcher to pitch to. Chris Sale said it, Nathan Eovaldi said it, and he's just a full package, it seems like, on both ends of the spectrum. And so it's been really nice to see sort of potentially the future backup catcher for the Red Sox. And then we also saw Triston Casas, his first career home run on Tuesday night.
Yeah, I mean, especially the Wong. I feel like for the past month, every time I go on Twitter, it's a different Connor Wong highlight.
True.
And especially when, you have Pilecki, who's a free agent. McGuire has been great. But, if he's going to start there next year, having a guy like Wong come up and kind of assert himself and get good reviews from the pitching is what you want to see right now, especially when you had a guy like Vasquez who was back there for so long and you could always rely on that for 7+ years. And then kind of having a change of guard and having it work out in a small sample size so far is good to see.
Now, what is your thoughts on the potential, platoon of Connor Wong and Reese McGuire in 2023? Because obviously Reese McGuire is with the Red Sox under control until 2025, and Connor Wong, has this year and last year worth of MLB experience. But I'm a fan of it, and that was a big question going into this season with what was going to happen with Vasquez, and obviously, as you mentioned, Pilecki being a free agent. But I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that tandem at all. I think McGuire gives you good veteran presence back there. He's not going to hit like he has the last couple of weeks, but he can, usually hit 250. And if Wong can hit, 270 and just do what he's doing so far, that's a good platoon. And then you have Hernandez also, waiting in the wings. So if either of those guys struggle, you could call up Hernandez and see what he has.
Very true. And, Hernandez and Wong have really impressed me during their time in Worcester. Both of them very effective at the plate. I believe Ronaldo Hernandez is hitting around 290, 11 home runs. And, we saw Wong be able to hit around like 14 and, with an average ending at like 280. And so I'm really curious to see, how Reese McGuire really continues to develop in a Red Sox uniform and continues to show us why that was such a great trade, especially for a guy like Jake Diekman, who, really wasn't doing a good job in that Red Sox bullpen. And so I'm excited to see how these guys continue to show what they have for this Red Sox lineup. But especially for you, who is a big part of Red Sox Twitter, you interact with a lot of people over there, and have a lot of followers in terms of Red Sox fans. What has your thoughts been on sort of the Triston Casas reaction? We've seen a lot of mixed reactions of some people thinking, after 8 at bats that he's a bust already. Some people thinking that it's weird with his pregame routine. And then obviously the same old people who begged for him to be up, getting super excited that we finally get to see the future first baseman for the Red Sox.
Yeah, Red Sox Twitter has been a fun place the last couple of weeks. But not surprised, just because as much as I love Red Sox fans, people tend to overreact, especially saying, Cass is going to be a bust after like less than 27 innings of baseball.
Pretty crazy.
And it's like, my thing with young players too is I don't trust them until they struggle, just because no one's going to come out and beat Mike Trout. So I'd actually prefer to him struggle this year, down the stretch when they're kind of out of the playoff race. So next year when he does take over those everyday reps, he kind of has that learning curve under his belt.
And, he struggled a little bit coming back from that ankle injury in Worcester. And then, we saw him really start to go down a stretch of getting on base consistently, which ultimately led to him getting the call up. But when I asked him a little bit about that, he gave me a little bit of a generic answer of, I just go up to the plate trying to get on base every single time and don't really focus about the numbers. But he's somebody who, Alex Cora really preached his maturity and how also, we heard Trevor Story talk a little bit about a speech that he made after his debut. And, I've talked to him twice, and very mature, very nice person. And I'm super excited to see the different things that he can not only do defensively, but also offensively, and really be able to help fans continue to get excited for the 2023 season.
Yeah, I feel like especially after this season is gone, kind of Red Sox Nation needs some excitement. With how hyped up Casas has been, he's definitely going to provide that. And I like how Cora said a couple days ago, that he's going to play most of the time, regardless of if it's a lefty or a righty on the mound. And when he's kind of the franchise cornerstone or kind of your franchise first baseman, that's going to be fun to watch over the next couple of weeks.
Very true. And one thing that we have seen him struggle a little bit with is striking out. And he struck out 3 times tonight, and then twice yesterday as well. And we've seen him not really agree with a lot of calls, and that's something that I think is going to come with maturity with him is being able to not get upset at the umpire. Obviously he's played baseball his entire life. He's had plenty of practice of that, and also not all the umpires are great in minors, but especially being able to have that play discipline and being able to differentiate pitches from the competitiveness difference from AAA to the majors, I think is going to be super important for him. But as you mentioned, I think that failure part is going to be critical at the start of his career. We saw Bobby Delbeck, really start to fail at the start of his career and then do a great job in the second half. Ultimately didn't end up doing great in 2022, but as you mentioned, I think that's going to be critical for Casas to continue building his maturity as a professional baseball player.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, especially when, Dahlbeck hasn't really been hitting. At this point, they're kind of just going to throw him into the fire. It's just going to be fun to see how he reacts. And especially that homer tonight, how it kind of came inside. He just crushed it. That was, good to see, especially against a playoff caliber team like the Rays.
And one thing that it's kind of deceiving with Casas, and it's very well documented in his statistics, is even though he's a big guy, a big structure, and can tower over you, surely towered over me, and I'm 5'10". I mean, I'm not very tall, but it's still towered over me. He's not a home run hitter. And, he's going to give you, especially at the start of his career, before he really starts to develop his power, a 300 average with 20 home runs. But that's what you want. You want a guy who can get on base, consistently at the plate, and then give you the power that you need at some points in the game coming up clutch. But, he's really sort of gone at the approach of getting on base first and allowing the power to just come at the moments that it's supposed to.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, especially with, watching Dahlback either kind of go up there, strike out, or hit a homer. Watching how hot or cold Franchy's been, just having a guy like Casas that can get on base. You'd take that now, and you have enough power in the lineup with Devers, and the other guys on that roster where he can kind of develop that, and you don't need it right away.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, it was tough to see, Rich Hill sort of struggle on the mound, 5 earned runs over 9 hits, pitched 4 innings of baseball, 3 strikeouts overall against the Tampa Bay Rays. And, it's unfortunate to see, Hill struggle, especially having such, past few games. We've really seen him start to get settled in, but just a tough start overall for Rich Hill. But at the end of the day, just stacking up these wins for the Rays, even though it's not great for the Red Sox in terms of the playoff race and in terms of their record. It's nice to see the Rays continuing to gain ground on the New York Yankees, currently 4.5 games away from that first place spot in the AL East.
Yeah, I don't know why I ever doubted the Rays when they didn't get off to a hot start, because it happens every year, and I always regret it. But it's been crazy to watch the Yankees' downfall. I mean, they were on pace to win a crazy amount of games, and since the trade deadline, Montes has struggled. Benny just had surgery. Mm-hmm. I mean, all those moves look good on paper, and they've just backfired completely. It's been an epic collapse so far. It's been crazy too how kind of trading Montgomery of all people has seemed to create a lot of friction, or kind of disrupted the chemistry that they had, and he's gone on and just been electric for the Cardinals in his short stint there so far.
Yeah, it really is crazy with Montgomery, how much, especially with how upset he was about getting traded from the Yankees, how much he was surprised about it as well. It's really cool to see him really finding his place in that St. Louis rotation and, continuing to improve this season, because he had a relatively good season before the trade deadline. But especially with Benintendi as well. It's kind of crazy. We saw Ellsbury obviously go to the Yankees, 5-6 years ago. And, same with Ellsbury as well, even though he left through free agency and Benintendi left through trade. And he ultimately, didn't have a choice of going to the Yankees. It's pretty crazy that, the last 2 times Red Sox players, especially favorable Red Sox players that have gone to the rival Yankees, have struggled and have been injured a lot. We saw Benintendi struggle a lot during his first month or so with the Yankees. But, as much as I want to see Benintendi succeed with how much he did in a Red Sox uniform, I can't say that I'm not satisfied.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, what I'm most interested too with the Yankees at this point is if this collapse continues and they don't go far in the playoffs, what do they do in the offseason? Because they went all in at the deadline. You have to pay Judge. If this keeps falling apart for the Yankees, it's going to be really interesting to see what that front office does to kind of fix the team and what trades, or if not trades, and how they kind of fix it all back together. Because you have the Orioles, who they're not the doormat anymore. The Rays, the Blue Jays will probably be better next year. Red Sox hopefully will be better. This was kind of the year, I feel like, for the Yankees to take advantage of where everyone else was. And right now it's not going the way they were planning for it to go.
Not at all. And, especially that whole August stretch, it was awful to watch, even just as like a baseball fan. I said to some friends who are Yankees fans, like, as a baseball fan, this isn't great for the sport. As a Red Sox fan, I love it. But, as much as we hate the Yankees, you never like seeing a fan base, really suffer like that. The Red Sox obviously dealt with their July. They dealt with their August last year. And, it's just tough to go through. But it's really nice to see, especially if they do have that collapse. It'll be, a little bit of a laugh for us Red Sox fans who aren't having that satisfying of a season so far. But, we're going to talk a little bit more about, how great Christian Arroyo has been throughout this season and did on Tuesday night's game in our second segment. Talk a little bit about Kike Hernandez signing a 1-year extension with the Red Sox, as well as talking about Jamie's thoughts on if there's really any chance whatsoever of the Red Sox making the playoffs. But before we do that, I just want to take a second to talk to you about Built Bar. And if you haven't tried Built Bar yet, I don't know even where to start to talk about how much I love these protein bars. They're not only delicious, but they're great for you. And one of the new flavors that they have is cookie dough chunk puffs. They have a light and chewy texture. It's real cookie dough chunks. And of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. And something with Built Bars that's really crazy is, they're not only made with the 100% real chocolate, they're not only good for you, but they taste great. They have a whopping 15 grams of protein in them. So, make sure to go over to built.com, get yourself a box. It's a perfect treat when you're, on the run, doing lots of things at work, and you're just able to grab a protein bar, whether it's before a workout or whether you're just hungry and need a snack. They're a great protein bar that not only tastes good, but they're great for you and can fill you up real quick. So go to built.com. We have a great offer for you. You can use the promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your order. That's use the promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your order at built.com. But, going into our second segment of the Locked On Red Sox podcast, we wanted to really highlight a guy in Christian Arroyo who came up clutch with a nice RBI hit in Tuesday night's game, being one of the 4 runs that the Red Sox scored. But he's been scorching hot at the plate ever since he's come back from his injury, and a batting average of 345. And Jamie, you had a great tweet on Twitter talking about how he's having a career season, career high 64 hits, 27 RBIs, 13 doubles, 12 walks, and 19 extra base hits. You tweeted that a day ago, so it might be a little bit skewed in the numbers, but it's been really impressive to see Christian Arroyo really showing what he has finally with some consistent playing time.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy who throughout his career, I feel like he's had injuries. He was the key piece in the Longoria trade with the Giants, so he came with high pedigree, and he's just always been injured, hasn't been able to stay on the field, and we've really seen the last couple of weeks what he can do when he's healthy. And in those numbers I pulled up, I think he's played more games this year than ever before. And as of yesterday, he had 7 less strikeouts compared to last year, which I think was his previous high at that point. So, it's not only that he's getting on base, you can also see the plate discipline is there. And it seems like every time the Red Sox need a clutch hit, he comes through. And it's just good to see a guy like that take advantage. And it just has you wonder, what could he do if he stayed healthy for 120, 140 games? So I don't think he would be a guy that's going to hit you 30 home runs, but I could see him hitting you in the teens, low teens, maybe drive in 60 to 70, and just be a solid hitter. And I feel like with the Red Sox, you can always find a place for that. His versatility means you can put him in the lineup, however creative you want to get. But it's been good to see him excel with the opportunity he's been given when he can stay on the field.
And especially to have a bench depth guy like him who has the versatility, like you said, he's sort of in that Brock Holt role where, when we need somebody to take a rest or, if an injury comes up, we're going to slide Christian Arroyo in, now he's not an outfielder, he's not a first baseman either. You got to kind of keep him at second base, shortstop, or third base. That's where he's been most effective. But, at the plate, been very impressive, as we said in the numbers, and, especially I like how you mentioned the Evan Longoria trade, because not a lot of people knew that he was a top prospect for the Giants, and then went over to the Rays, and then ultimately that's where Heimblum sort of fell in love with him, and the Red Sox got him through the waiver wire. So it's pretty crazy how he came to the Red Sox, but it's Heimblum working his magic and being able to find great depth in a guy like Christian Arroyo. And he's also somebody who, we've praised him a lot, over the last year or so with what he's able to do in the clubhouse. Great personality, just great energy, very nice guy when I had the opportunity to interview him. And, I'm really excited to see, how he continues to develop going into next season. Hopefully he can be a lot more healthy and is really able to, plug into different places, kind of like, we saw Kike Hernandez when he first came over last season, help him play at second base and center field before he ultimately solidified himself in that center field role. But, moving on to him, I'm curious what your reaction was to him signing a extension for $10 million, sort of out of nowhere. It happened right after last night's game, right after Lauren and I recorded. So, I saw the notification. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, I love that deal for the Sox, to be honest with you, especially the quote that I saw on social media was how Bloom told him that he's going to build a much more competitive team. Yeah. And I feel like when you look at Kike, that's not a guy who would take that comment lightly. which should give Red Sox fans hope for next year. He's just the guy you want to have. We've seen since he came off the injured list what he can do offensively, that spark he can provide. He can play second, he can play outfield. He gives you a veteran piece. And with a guy like Duran, who kind of hasn't lived up to expectations, you can let him go back to Worcester and kind of get right, having Kike back there next year. And it's not like whatever prospects come up, you're only tied to Hernandez for 1 year, so you're not sacrificing the future. And you have a guy who loves Boston, who could be a spark plug. We've all seen what he does in the playoffs. So it's, I feel like it's a win-win, especially to plug that hole. If you're going to sign a free agent, you're probably going to have to spend $10 million anyways. So at least now you got a guy who knows what it's like to play in Boston, and he checks off all the boxes of what you would want, even if you're going to find a replacement.
And I did find it interesting. Some people saying that they thought that he got paid a little bit more than they might have expected. Well, at the end of the day, they signed him to a $7 million a year deal, where 2 years, $14 million, and especially with the legendary sort of performance that he had in last year's playoffs. Like, let's say that you signed him to an extension at the start of this season, or at the end of last season. That'd be $15 million a year probably. And so, even though, he wasn't a great contributor for the Red Sox this season, only playing 69 games, the average down at 217, not exactly what you want, but, that might have helped the Red Sox get him at a little bit of a lesser value. And as you mentioned, this is just a great sort of message that the Red Sox don't believe that Jarren Duran is ready to take over in center field. And, I don't think that he is either. We've seen him have a little bit of a different energy, it seems like, down in Worcester. And I think he needs a lot more time to figure that out. And it's pretty crazy that I'm saying that when he's going into his 27-year season next year. But, I think this gives the Red Sox a little bit more insurance and, fills a hole in that center field spot that I think was a little bit of a question mark going into the offseason. Yeah,
we were talking about this on the Obstructed View earlier too, but in my opinion with Duran, I do feel like he can be a contributor to this team. He's shown flash this year, and obviously it hasn't gone as they expected, but having Kike back takes that pressure off. Right. And it gives him kind of the perfect opportunity to be that first guy they call up next year with injuries, or if they need an extra outfielder. So I just love the signing all around. And I think, especially to mentor, a guy like Duran, or just to mentor any young outfielder, having Kike back there also helps a lot.
Especially just like the routes too. Like we saw Duran really struggle with the routes in center field, making some wonky ones that made some pretty ugly plays. And I think with a guy like Kike, who's not like a primary center fielder, he was a utility guy in LA before he came to Boston, and being able to help him sort of figure out, especially Fenway center field, which is the most difficult one in my opinion in all of baseball, I think is super critical.
Yeah, and especially with, they have guys like Walker, Valdi, they have a lot of free agents they're going to have to take care of, and at least having one off the list before the offseason makes Bloom's life a little easier. And with the guys they're going to look at, I feel like probably Walker, Valdi, that's going to cost you more than it would have been to sign Hernandez to a 1-year deal. So at least now they kind of have the easier deal, I feel like, out of all those out of the way, and you can focus on the big guys like Walker, Valdi, the whole Bogart situation, extending Devers. It just makes their life a lot easier.
Couldn't agree more. And, I think I sort of wrote down in my notes and chuckled a little bit when I saw the tweet from Alex Spear. As you mentioned, Chaim Bloom promised him that the team would be better next year. And, your co-host on the Obstructed View podcast and our mutual friend, Chris Henrik, him and I talked a little bit about this when he came on. I believe it was around a month or so ago, that this is the most important offseason for the Red Sox, in maybe 15 to 20 years, but especially for Chaim Bloom, and being able to show the ownership, the fan base, and in my opinion, also Alex Cora as well, that, this past year, didn't go as planned, and he has learned from the last 2 years. Granted, the Red Sox came 2 wins away from going to the World Series in 2021. It was sort of like 2018 to 2019. You weren't able to replicate that, and being able to make smart moves, especially to build up this bullpen that has been a major issue for the last 2 to 3 years, and really being able to show ownership that he's here for the long haul, and that he's not going to be another general manager like Ben Cherington or David Dombrowski that's only going to have a 4-year tenure in Boston.
Yeah, I feel like that was perfectly said. Especially, at the deadline, I feel like we start to saw some of the cracks just when we had the open door policy and you had Bogarts and some other guys saying we need help or we don't know the direction of this franchise. I do think he's going to be a little more aggressive this offseason just because he's a little more on the hot seat. Not saying that they're going to obviously not going to let him go, but I feel like ownership's going to be like, all right, Heim, we can't do another year of kind of failing to meet expectations or kind of a repeat, which I think is going to be easier with him just with the prospects like Casas and Bell we've talked about now being contributors. But I do think they're going to be very active on the free agent market. I'm really interested to see what Bloom does because he doesn't, strike me as the guy who would just say that to a player like Hernandez and not follow through.
Mm-hmm.
I think they only have 3 guys under contract before you factor in arbitration or those type of deals. So they're going to have plenty of money to spend. Hopefully they get some bullpen arms. It's going to be fun to see how he reshapes this team, especially the pitching staff. Because in my opinion, offensively, they need some minor tweaks.
Yeah.
But when you compare that to the pitching, that's where I think Bloom's going to put money into. And if they do trades, that's where I feel like the focus will be.
And Pham with the player options, $6 million, can't beat that. And the infield looking unreal. Especially with Story back in that lineup. And I think it's going to be interesting as well to see what he does with the rotation and the bullpen. I brought up yesterday potentially Waka. I would like a 2-year deal, $13 to $15 million. I think that's very fair. Doubles his salary from this year. From 7. If you doubled it, would be 14, and if you gave him $1 million more, a little bit of a bonus. So I think 2 years for 30 is very is a great deal for Waka, especially for a guy who has been, in my opinion, the ace of this rotation throughout this season.
No, I agree. I feel like you can't let Waka leave, and especially what he brings to the young pitchers with how he's kind of had to remake himself. He's a guy who's been, in Tampa, St. Louis. He knows how to deal with adversity. And this year he's finally been healthy for the most part, other than that kind of like 3-week stretch a little while ago. But he's shown that when he's healthy, he can still be the dominant pitcher he was in St. Louis when he won 17 games. And I think in like 2013 or whatever year that was. And he wanted that on the staff for next year, especially with, the health problems that Sales had. Evaldi will be a free agent, like we've said. There's a lot of question marks in that rotation. And bringing Waka back would help a lot, especially since he showed he can handle playing in Boston.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I think it's been really interesting not only hear your thoughts on the future, but also the Tuesday night's game. And I think it's nice, especially with how I guess the amount of questions that were on the Red Sox to-do list going into the offseason. It's nice to cross off a few, have a little bit more clarity on what's happening in 2023, and be a little bit more excited, especially with how tough, the end of this season has been. But as always, Jamie, greatly appreciate you coming on. But I greatly appreciate everybody tuning into a Locked On Red Sox podcast, and thank you for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen of every single day. Now make your second listen and go out and check out the Ultimate Pro Football Preview of 2022. This is an 8-episode extravaganza to get you ready for the NFL season. The local team experts of the Locked On Podcast Network, plus a betting angle from Lee Sterling of Locked On Bets, all combining into one ultimate NFL preview. Search for the Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022 on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also follow Locked On Red Sox on Twitter at LO_Red Sox, myself at Jake Iggy, Lauren at La, 3 laws, and Lauren with 4 R's. And Jamie, how can the people support you?
Okay, they go to my Twitter. It's Jamie, then Gatlin, number 17. I'm going to have a lot more prospect stuff coming out with the Charleston River Dogs, that stuff that I've been doing. And a little college football that I technically can't announce until a couple days. But if you like Rutgers football, you can look up my handle on Friday. But a lot of minor league and college football content coming to the fans.
Hey, let's go. And also make sure to check out the Obstructed View podcast. Stephen Brown himself, Chris Henrik, and Also, Mickey as well do a great job of covering the Red Sox and giving their great perspective. Sometimes Chris is in a bathtub. Sometimes they have some great guests on. Like Steve Perrault, as well as Jake from the Carabas podcast. But as always, greatly appreciate you coming on, my friend, and definitely want to get you on once the off season gets rolling and we can starting to plan for the 2023 season. But as always, be well, my friend, and really excited to have you on again. But we'll end this episode, how we always end it. Let's go,
Go
Sox. Peace.